Everyone is away, my son gives me a massage while I'm in my underwear. I lean down and... Infidelity story. The silence of the woods is said to conceal many secrets. Mine started in a cabin in the middle of nowhere, where silence holds more weight than speech, and the boundaries between love, loneliness, and desire intertwine in peculiar ways. A simple escape transformed into an unforgettable moment, one that I can never undo or forget. I found myself a wife and a mother at 39, yet neither role truly resonated with me. As the years went by, my husband Cyril seemed to drift further away from me. He was occupied with his job, and upon returning home, he either engaged with his laptop or enjoyed some television. That resulted in me taking care of our son, Jason, and myself. There existed neither a connection nor a flicker of excitement. A subtle harmony surrounded me, leaving me with the sense that my presence was insignificant. It hasn't always been like this. I vividly recall the early days of our marriage, when Cyril would delight me with handwritten notes tucked in my bag, or whisk me away for weekends filled with joy and affection. Those memories seemed to belong to a different existence, buried beneath the weight of obligation and disregard. I toiled diligently to revive the emotions we once shared. Candlelit dinners, fresh underwear, and heartfelt conversations were all greeted with courteous dismissal or indifference. I grew weary of the effort. Why attempt to connect when the one you cherish appears so distant? I wasn't surprised when Cyril suggested I take Jason to the family house for the weekend. He continued, his gaze fixed intently on his phone. It will benefit you as well. Lately, you haven't had the chance to share much time together. I had a strong feeling he wouldn't be joining us after all. However, he extended an offer. He consistently devised an excuse or highlighted a significant objective that demanded his attention. Doesn't every woman experience that sentiment? The profound, hollow solitude that arises from the realization that you are not a priority, but merely an afterthought. I still consented. Perhaps I was simply too fatigued to express anything. A fragment of my being may have yearned to uncover something I had misplaced, despite my ignorance of what it truly was. Ordinary events seemed to fade into the background in the days leading up to the journey, yet an unusual atmosphere of quiet anticipation lingered in the air. Over the last few years, Jason had grown increasingly remote. He wasn't the young man who would seek comfort in my bed after a nightmare or plead with me to join him for his favorite shows when he turned 17. He was evolving into a man, with broad shoulders, a deeper voice, and a subtle confidence that occasionally left me feeling unsettled. I attempted to learn more about him by inquiring about his school, friends, and even his hobbies, yet most of the time he would respond with just a single word. Before long, it was Friday afternoon. I observed the remarkable independence Jason had developed as we packed the car. He navigated with precision, effortlessly lifting the large bags and placing them in the trunk without any assistance from me. It marked a significant transformation from the clumsy adolescent who would stumble over his own belongings while carrying groceries. I felt a mix of pride in my accomplishments and a lingering sadness all at once. Was this what it meant to be a caregiver? Observing your child evolve into a person you hardly recognize. Although the journey to the cabin felt ordinary, an unsettling anxiety lingered that I couldn't fully identify. To initiate a casual conversation, I inquired about his school life, his circle of friends, and his weekend plans. How thrilled are you about the upcoming trip? A pause from school and everything that comes with it, I inquired as I gazed over at him. He shrugged and gazed forward at the road. I suppose that's the case. Oh, is it just us? I was taken aback by the manner in which he expressed it. Did that catch your attention? Are you enjoying yourself? I tried to dismiss it, yet his words lingered, weaving themselves into the fabric of my thoughts. Upon catching sight of the recognizable outline of the house, a surge of nostalgia enveloped me. This location once served as my sanctuary, a refuge where Cyril and I could escape during the early days of our marriage. Once upon a time. The cottage brimmed with laughter, secrets exchanged in hushed tones by the fire, and nights that concluded with sheets in delightful disarray. But now it felt hollow, much like my bond with Cyril. I stirred from my slumber at the sound of Jason's voice. "Mom, are you all right?" "Indeed," I responded swiftly, all the while feigning a smile. I was reflecting on the duration of our stay since we arrived. He nodded, his expression inscrutable. "Indeed, it has been some time." Upon entering, the creaking of the porch steps instantly evoked a flood of memories. Within, the atmosphere was brisk, carrying a subtle scent of smoke and pine. Jason began to tidy up the car with a calm and systematic approach. I observed him intently, noting the changes in his demeanor now that he had grown and gained confidence. The revelation struck me with an overwhelming force. He had changed from the little boy I once knew. Later that night, we gathered by the fireplace, where the flames danced and flickered, creating shifting shadows on the walls. I filled a glass with wine for myself. The rich, velvety crimson hue enveloped me in warmth. "Would you care for some?" I inquired with a hint of humor, fully expecting him to decline. I was taken aback when he paused and shook his head. "I appreciate your concern, I'm doing well, thank you." He gazed at me longer than I expected. I was unable to discern what was amiss with his expression. "Were you held in high regard by them?" Curious. As I shifted in my seat, I noticed the profound silence that had enveloped the cabin. The only sound that filled the space between us was the crackling of the fire. I whispered to myself gently, "You've matured so greatly." He smiled, his gaze unwavering from mine. "I believe I do." "Indeed. What do you think?" "You seem different from the typical mom, don't you?" The statement caught me off guard. I chuckled oddly, feeling a warmth spread across my cheeks. "What does that truly signify?" He shrugged, his expression inscrutable. "Do you simply appear different and more youthful?" I was at a loss for words. Was he attempting to uplift my spirits? Or was it something different? I noticed the cabin seemed unusually quiet that night as I lay in bed. I repeatedly reflected on our conversation, replaying every word in my mind. Was I imagining this? Or did something shift between us? I gazed at the wooden beams overhead. The moonlight streaming through the window softened the jagged edges of the beams, transforming their roughness into a gentle glow. In my thoughts, visions of the past intertwined with the uncertainties of the present, creating a sense of tension and unease within me. Have you ever reconsidered your previous perceptions of someone? Curious if there's something clear that you've overlooked. The thought lingered in my mind as I drifted off to sleep. That this weekend held the promise of change, of making everything different. The flames were dwindling, and the final remnants of wood were nearly extinguished. I stepped out into the frigid air to gather more firewood. As I trudged inside with the heavy logs, the biting cold air stung my face. The wood felt burdensome. And once I had dragged it into the hut, an intense ache settled in my neck like never before. As I stood there, my fingers tracing the tender spot, I felt the ache of solitude resonate through every fiber of my being. "Mom, you seem to be in pain. I'm here to assist you." Jason spoke, and his voice took on a deeper tone. It was strange how fast he had developed. How he had transformed into the man I saw before me, extending his hands in a cabin where we were the only two souls for miles. I lacked confidence in my own voice, so I simply nodded. The ancient, groaning couch prompted me to turn away from him, allowing my hair to fall so he could access my neck. When he first touched me, it was gentle. The way he meticulously untangled the knots stirred a longing in my heart for what was absent in my life. Then he continued to caress her with slow, intentional strokes that felt too intimate to be merely a massage. I ought to have told him to stop. As I sensed the warmth of his breath against my neck and noticed a subtle shift in his breathing, I realized I should have spoken up. I did not, however. I longed for a connection, to sense that I still held allure and desire. And Jason, my son, was offering me something that my partner hadn't provided in years. As he lowered his hands, a wave of warmth surged through me. It was a blend of embarrassment and longing. He glided his fingers over the space between my shoulder blades, and I arched slightly, yearning for his touch, craving more. Was it inappropriate for me to have these feelings about my son? Was I so lonely that it transformed my desires into something unattainable? Does that improve your experience? His voice was soft, nearly a whisper. As if he sensed the delicate balance of the line we were treading. I managed to respond with a soft, breathy, "Yes, thank you." I intended to conclude it right then and move on. Yet I found myself unable to do so. I couldn't do it. As the night deepened, the house fell into a profound silence, with only the whisper of the wind outside breaking the stillness. As I searched for additional wood, thoughts of Jason's touch consumed me, causing me to trip and tumble onto the ice. The chill was biting and the fall was excruciating as I lost my footing. Jason arrived immediately. He seized my arms and drew me back into the comforting embrace of the house. "Mom, you're injured." His concern was evident. He gently explored my body with his hands, checking for any signs of injury. His fingers grazed my bruised leg from the fall, and a sharp pain shot through me. Once more he had me take a seat, but this time it was on the edge of the couch. His gentle hands caressed my rigid leg, yet his gaze had shifted, revealing a longing that mirrored my own feelings about solitude. He glided his fingers along my leg. I understood I ought to intervene, yet my body insisted it craved the contact. As his gaze shifted from my leg to my eyes, an unspoken question lingered in the air between us. I stayed right where I was. Instead, I observed him closely. Was this merely a concern, or was there something deeper at play? We were fully aware of the peril that lay ahead. The flames cast deep shadows across his face, lending him an air of maturity and rugged masculinity. At that moment, the cabin seemed to exist in a realm far removed from everything familiar. From all the constraints and regulations. His touch transcended mere repairs, it became a journey of discovery and assertion. As he lifted his hands, I felt my heart race and my breath hitch in my throat. Did I truly desire this? Is this the connection I lacked previously? How near I longed to be in my frigid, wedlock bed. The cabin served as our own sanctuary, where we transcended the roles of just a mother and her child. We were two solitary souls, irresistibly pulled together by an intense longing for closeness and warmth. With each brush of his hands, the boundaries between us blurred, until I found myself leaning into him. My body responding in unfamiliar ways to his touch. Have you ever felt an overwhelming urge to reach out and connect with others? You desire affection. Have you ever made a mistake? The gentle glow of dawn filtered through the cabin window as I stirred awake. Throughout the night, the storm had swept through, departing with a pristine layer of snow that enveloped the earth beyond. It ought to have been lovely, tranquil, and perhaps even comforting, yet I felt a tightness in my gut. Initially, I found myself simply gazing at the frosted glass. I found myself grappling with a multitude of thoughts and emotions, uncertain of their nature or how to articulate them. The room felt frigid, despite the fact that the fire in the chimney had long since extinguished. The burden of remorse pressed heavily upon my heart. What occurred last night? Despite my reluctance to dwell on it, the memory lingered, taunting me. Each fleeting glance and hushed word felt overwhelming. Even so, the information available is insufficient for comprehension. The noise of something shifting behind me shattered my concentration. The couch bed creaked, a subtle reminder that we weren't truly alone as Jason rose from his seat. I shut my eyes and feigned deep slumber to avoid confronting him, yet he remained silent. I heard him rise and move about the house, yet I couldn't discern the sound of his footsteps. I finally rose and draped the blanket over my shoulders. He was at the counter preparing a pan and eggs when I glanced over. "Good morning," I said, my voice trembling. He cast a fleeting glance upward, yet his expression remained unreadable. "Good morning," he replied, then returned to his work. Much lingered unspoken in the atmosphere surrounding us. He averted his gaze, yet his movements were intentional, nearly precise. I couldn't tell if he was attempting to steer clear of me or simply at a loss for words. "Are you making breakfast?" I asked, eager to shatter the silence. "Indeed," he remarked with simplicity. I believed it would be best to have a meal before we start packing up. It was an ordinary statement, so commonplace. Yet it seemed to carry a deeper significance hidden within his words. Perhaps I was merely conjuring it in my mind. As he cracked the eggs and whisked them, I observed him for a moment. The motion of his hands appeared disjointed from the tension that filled the space. He appeared changed this morning. He exhibited a calm demeanor and maintained a sense of composure. "Would you like some assistance?" I inquired. He swivels his gaze. "I understand." As we dined, a hush enveloped us. The solitary sound was the occasional clink of spoons against plates. I attempted to divert my attention from my meal, yet I was acutely aware of his intense, penetrating stare fixed upon me. "Jason," I began to express an idea. But I found myself at a loss for how to conclude it. "What will I express?" He remained silent. Instead, he offered a subtle, nearly undetectable nod, and then he turned away. After we finished breakfast, we began to pack our things. In order to transport the heavy items to the car, Jason navigated with both speed and caution. I remained indoors, organizing my surroundings and attempting to soothe my restless thoughts. What was I meant to do when Cyril came back? How was I meant to behave normally when I felt anything but? The house lay still as Cyril arrived in the late afternoon. His joyful voice shattered the stillness. He entered and shook the snow from his boots with a heavy stomp. "It seems the storm didn't leave you too stuck," he remarked. I attempted a smile and spoke, just above a whisper. "Last night, a thick blanket of snow covered everything." In that fleeting moment of a kiss on the cheek, he revealed the depths of his kindness and charm. However, all things was devoid, like a facade I couldn't penetrate. "What were your thoughts on the cabin? Can you both manage to live without Wi-Fi?" He cracked a joke while glancing at both Jason and me. Jason merely shrugged, maintaining a neutral expression. It was calm and serene. Tension hung in the air, yet Cyril appeared oblivious to it. He may have been too caught up in his own excitement to pay attention. He began to unpack his belongings, sharing stories about the journey he had just returned from and outlining his plans for the upcoming week. I found it difficult to concentrate on his words while reminding myself of our shared living situation. Jason gazed at me, his eyes locked onto mine, poised in anticipation. It seemed as though every gaze posed a question I was unable to respond to. "Hey, Jason," Cyril said, placing his hand on his son's shoulder. "I appreciate your support for your mom during my absence. You are a wonderful child." Jason flinched when his dad made contact, and his jaw clenched slightly. "That's fine," he said, yet his voice trailed off. Cyril appeared oblivious, yet I was acutely aware. It ached in my chest in ways I couldn't articulate. As Cyril drifted off beside me that night, I remained wide awake, my gaze fixed on the ceiling. Although the room was shrouded in darkness, my mind was illuminated with clarity. What prompted me to act that way? What did I allow to happen? The next step I was about to take held even greater significance. They failed to arrive, leaving me uncertain about when they might show up. Reflecting on the past, I find myself wishing I could claim it was merely an accident, and that we abandoned everything in that house. But what is the reality? That weekend transformed everything, and I have been navigating the aftermath ever since. Have you ever found yourself ensnared by your own impulses? Have you ever pondered the idea of what might happen if you gazed at someone you ought not to? Your response might guide me in finding a way to navigate through this situation we're facing.